So the first panel we heard from this morning were representatives from various government entities. So I'm very excited today that we have 3 panelists representing the startup ecosystem. We have a very short session here, so we want to make sure we focus on the key messages that we want to take away from the startups. The 3 gentlemen you have here today represent 3 very different startups, 3 very different journeys, spanning pre-COVID-19 to just last year from Foundation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. If you could do brief intros and then talk a little bit about your journey.
Hi everybody. When we started the company, we didn't start a defense company. We started the hobby company to build drones because we loved flying drones. We still do. And you would think that a startup would pivot, but as it happens, the world pivoted around us, and we ended up, having command over what's arguably the most defining defense technology of the 21st century to date. So, when the war in Ukraine started, we had some friends there. We started helping them. We got some feedback about, what are the challenges of using essentially hobby-grade technology in 21st century drone warfare against a superpower. So, we in order to help these guys, we started transforming our hobby-grade technology. And, 2 years, 3 years in, we're now a defense company as it happens.
I guess ours was a little bit different. We started definitely trying to be a defense company. We actually started out trying to build a low-cost cruise missile. What turned out was very much more interesting was to build something that was foundationally modular, both from a software standpoint, firmware, and hardware. We really learned through, obviously, the war in Ukraine and through other endeavors that you have to keep up with this pace of warfare. You can't, cut hard tooling and expect that that same vehicle that you're making 3-4 years ago is going to be a vehicle that will, vie in the latest versions of the conflict. And so I wouldn't say we really pivoted, but we definitely steered into the skid and went full on defense. And there's definitely no looking back.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kusti, and I'm from Frankenburg Technologies. The aim of our company is to solve the biggest problem of this generation, which is 0 countries in Europe have the necessary level of defense readiness to confront Russians as they are now. That is a fact. We measure defense readiness in hours, not in days, weeks, or months, or years. The issue behind that is, especially in the air defense, Russians are mass manufacturing their aerial threats in millions, where our capabilities to take them down is in hundreds. If we're not going to change that, then they're going to shower us with drones and missiles that we won't be able to confront. So what we are doing, we're building affordable, mass-manufactured air defense missile systems with real rocket motors, with something that are fast and accurate. And this is the reason why the whole air defense infrastructure after the Second World War has been built on missiles, because missiles are the only scalable solution. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. So as you set out to establish your companies, and you've thought through how do you take your idea, turn it into something that's actually a prototype, and then how do you scale, or how do you bring that capability to scale? What were some critical decision points that you had to navigate through as a company, and what information do you wish that you had had access to at those critical decision points?
So when we started up, our big idea was that you don't need to go to China to do hardware. You can do it in Europe, especially in the part of Europe where we're operating in. And we were from the get-go, we were set up to do as much as we can in Europe, and we today largely do. Let me turn it around. I'm happy that we didn't know how difficult it would be, because we would never embark upon it. And I'll just leave it at that. But just to give you an idea how hard it is. We're coming from a space where you build your own drone, and building one is easy; it's going to fly. Building 10 and have the yields, that's a next order of magnitude. And imagine going from 10 to 100 to 1,000 to tens of thousands. That just the game keeps changing. And I remember that when we started with arguably the hardest part, most complex part of the whole stack, the video goggles. And in order to, we had a Kickstarter. In order to hit our timeline, we calculated that we have to do 40 units per day. First day when we started manufacturing, we had everything, process, the line set up, the tools, the materials came in. And then first day when we started building them, we managed to build 4, not 44, and out of that 4, 3 kind of worked. No, 3 didn't work, 1 kind of worked for a while, right? So eventually we got to a point where we can do that. And then, I think manufacturing is something that you have to learn the hard way. We were compelled to operate under heavy constraints in terms of space, in terms of cost, but I think that built us into what we are today. And today we are capable of having like very small footprint manufacturing, and we are also capable. We've simplified all the designs, so we can not only do it ourselves, but we can easily transfer that know-how to our partners, who can also set up small footprint manufacturing space that they can do that. So a lot of this distributed manufacturing model is baked into our business model, of how we do business with our partners and how we enable them to do what we are able to do.
Yeah, I'd say one of the most important things is thinking about design for manufacturing up front. If you're not doing that, or if you're not using a process that allows you to be nimble and switch between revs of your product, you're hurting yourself, and that's why we have a fully additive manufactured airframe. Is that the only way to build airframes, or even the best way? Not necessarily, but for us, it's the best because additive really shines there. It's high mix, high volume, as long as you choose the processes correctly. And so we've been able to do thousands of revs to our vehicle, minor revs, 10 major revs. That would have costed tens of millions of dollars in hard tooling if we'd chose to manufacture our vehicles in a different way. So how things have been done is not how things should be done, and I think that's one of the big takeaways from getting going here.
So I will point out 3 things. We are single-purpose, single-use company. We build weapons. We build something that is potentially lethal. It's a very difficult business to be in Europe. In order to start manufacturing in this business, 18 to 24 months to get a license, and upfront cost starting from 50,000 a month for just getting your permits and all the legal cost. So you need to have investors who have big enough balls to take this, because you don't even know whether you're going to get all those permits. That's the reason why there are almost 0 startups that come from this scratch going to the lethal space. And this needs to change. And this is just the upfront cost that you need to take in time, money, and also the risk. Second one, building weapons in affordable and mass manufactured way is the question of what is the lowest bar for requirements. What is something that will address the 80% of threats, and what is this 20% that you can just cut off? And that is the hardest question, and for that you need to really understand what is the military requirement. And you need to understand it without having a customer with you every single day. You really need to build it in-house. Actually, how our opponent's going to fight, what is the scale, what is their doctrine, how they think. This is difficult. The challenge is how to build stuff that is good enough, ready at the hand of warfighters, not something that is perfect and somewhere in your Excel sheet in the horizon back in the, right in your R&D schedule. And thirdly, build something where the supply chain exists. That's very simple to say, very hard to execute, but I can speak about the missile industry. The missile industry, especially in the short-range air defense, have been brain dead for the last 30 years. Why? Because there has been no demand. Short-range air defense was built against helicopters. So how many nations are there in the world who will feasibly see a large-scale helicopter threat against their nation? None. So that is the reason why the maximum capacity of all the factories with 300, 400 missiles here is a less than designer bag industry. So it needs to And the reason for that is that it's special purpose supply chain. You only have this supply chain for only these missiles, and there is no surprise why they haven't been able to ramp up in almost 1,200 days after the war started. But on the other hand, there is the electronics industry, consumer appliance industry, or iPhones have better sensor than the short-range missiles have. Why don't we use those? Why don't we get to those? Why don't we see how we use those? The quality assurance process is a million times better with these components than in the military-grade industry. Why? Because there are billions of people who use that every day. And these manufacturers cannot allow for these things to break down. So this industry exists. Military grade does not mean better quality in our days. It means worse quality with higher price tag. This is something that needs to be taken into account.
Absolutely. So recognizing that you bring the perspective of the startup ecosystem, how much do the larger industries, the primes in the US parlance, or the big integrators factor into your long-term plans? Do you plan to continue to operate independently, or do you plan to bring in a closer collaboration with some of the larger firms that exist globally and or domestically in your home nations?
So I think that the cooperation with existing primes is like that's going to happen on an integration level, where systems that we are involved with will have to integrate with the systems that are already out there. So there's a natural place to cooperate. However, I think what the war in Ukraine showed that the procurement system needs to change. If we're looking at a period of 5-ish years for a new technology to kind of crawl through the whole process before it can be put in the hands of the warfighter, that's not going to work, because what we're seeing in Ukraine is that this cycle is happening in a matter of weeks. So we need to figure out a way how to make the procurement move at the speed of technology. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. And if you look at what happens when a transformed force, transformed in a way of adoption of these new and emerging technologies, meets an untransformed force, you don't need to look very far behind. You can look at Nagorno-Karabakh and see what happened there. And this is the reality that we're facing. And if we're looking at the type of enemy that the Europe is facing now, that enemy has transformed over the last 3 years. They are a transformed force. For better or worse, they are a transformed force. So, and where are we in that process? So if we want to enable the transformation of our defense forces, we need to rethink how we do procurement.
Yeah, so obviously Lockheed Martin led our seed round, so I have some positive views on the primes. Look, we don't build B-21s and F-35s and all these things that, regardless of what our current administration says, we do need these things. Primes are the companies that can build those types of things. However, they're not nimble enough to react to every new emerging technology as fast as startups can. We have pressure because we are so small and we have to do a lot with a little, and I think that kind of enables us to move into sectors of the market more quickly than a large prime can do. And to your point about procurement, I mean, even Lockheed's system, we work on a lot of deals with them, and even just kind of working through the eaches of all of their systems can sometimes be, from a startup's eyes, kind of nightmarish. Look, they have a lot of systems because they deal with probably hundreds of thousands of vendors. We don't have to do that, but there are just ways that startups are able to kind of outmaneuver the primes, not in a negative way, because the primes can also beat us at a lot of things, but there's a nice way for us to work together in tandem to produce really good results and to be partners and allies in a lot of our pursuits.
Well, I got a defense background for 20 years in National Defense of Estonia. And I always had a thought in my head that how come it can be that there are, I don't know, hundreds of different industries in the world. And there is one defense industry that only can function and wake up in the morning where the customer comes in and presents his requirement, his budget, his cost plus structure, and only then you can develop products. How can it be like that? And all the other industries can anticipate the market, can put up their own capital, have internal incentive to somehow scale, make the products that are commoditized or similar, that interact with each other. And there is one industry that's internally just unable to do that. I think we are now in the moment where the fact that the king is naked has come to the house. If you, and especially in the more sophisticated, higher-end industries like missile industries, if you would go to the incumbents now saying that, hey, I want to buy you 100 missiles, 1,000 missiles, they will say, yes, let's do it. Delivery times 2034. Really, 9-10 years away. And then in the same conference, we say about the urgency. We say about the lack of defense readiness. We speak about necessity to act now. We speak about lack of capex and all this. I mean, the market is there. Why isn't it changing? And the only way it's going to change is with newcomers. The problem with the current industry is that it doesn't scale down. Making very expensive stuff 20 times cheaper does not work like that. You cannot go to auto industry saying that make the Renault Clio not 30,000, 25, I don't know how much does it cost. You cannot make it with 2,500. You just cannot make it. It doesn't work like that. But if you start from the scratch, make it something really different, re-engineer it, then it's possible. Rethink the way how the mobility works in auto industry. And we are on the verge of this generational change. Because if we don't, then we're just going to lose the Russians. I mean, we are on the verge. There is no way of taking any additional steps back.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads into the last question that I want to pose to you today. So in the remaining few minutes, we got 5. Recognizing that you have representatives from government, from industry, and from the investment community, what is your call to action? We've heard reform the procurement process, which is one we've heard over and over again. It's going to be very slow to change. But if you could say, what is one thing that we could all, from those 3 different sectors, walk away today and immediately start taking action on that you feel would have very large outsized impact to the startup ecosystem when we're thinking about defense manufacturing in the next year or so. What do you think that you would, what would you pose to this audience today?
So I can talk about unmanned assets specifically. It has to be about cooperation to facilitate distributed manufacturing. Because if we're looking at the capability of launching long-range precision strikes, we're looking at our industrial base being targeted first. So if you can keep your footprint smaller, as small as you can, that's a clear path to resilience. And in the line of business that we are in, you can actually do that. So, I'm going to go back to procurement, and in addition to making it much, much faster, it needs to facilitate cooperation in Europe between the member states, but also, if I'm looking at just how many companies in the US we have enabled to shorten their development times in not months, years, by enabling them to use our technology in their solutions that are tailored to their end customer. Like, this is clear path to victory. So I think that, this type of cooperation does not need to, it's happening in Europe already, but it also needs to be transatlantic.
I guess I'll say 2 things. One is that we need a sort of NATO standardization agreement, or STANAG, drone platforms for NATO. That's one that could be a huge win. Standardize across the board, leverage open source like PX4, Lorenz was just here. These things are great. We need to build off that. Obviously, where there are security limitations, we can roll those punches and do different things, but there should be both standardized distributed manufacturing in these different countries that can build the same vehicles over and over again in high volumes. And then I think the second thing I would just say is the fact that we're still talking about this dual use need for investors and whatnot, it just is kind of hilarious to me. A lot of these folks would be invested in the S&P 500 with folks like Lockheed on there. Like, why are we worried about a company being dual use to invest in them? I think it's crazy. We have to start looking at companies that are pure defense plays and making sure that we're investing capital in them to supercharge them.
Well, I got two words, and the first is affordable, and the second one is mass. I got also background in defense procurement from government side, so I need to a little bit defend my craft. I don't think the procurement system itself is a problem. The problem is that, and when I worked in the procurement, then the lack of affordable, available at scale, integrating with everything products was something that was the problem. And I think, we have all observed what happened with Ukrainian assistance. US government issued export licenses for Ukrainian assistance over a weekend. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. Legally, everything like that. I was there, I saw it. Germany procured 155 millimeter artillery shells from who knows where in a week. They did it. No problem with procurement process. The problem is availability. The problem is that the weapons, equipment don't interact with. The problem is that things are overly expensive and delivery times are outrageously long. That is the issue why the procurement is difficult. The supply is, and as the prices are so high, then the price for one contract is so high that the governments are incentivized to be in this competitive environment where everything is so transparent, everything can be sued, because the price of one contract is so high. You cannot afford to lose that. But if you are commoditized your business, you can afford to do that because there are other customers out there. You're not so reliant on your whole bottom line for one contract. And this is something that needs to change in the market. It's not only the demand side, it's equally also the supply side.
Well, thank you very much. Obviously, we had some resounding comments in this audience. It really resonated. So I think we are at time. So thank you all very much. And please continue the conversation after this.